She was contacted by aliens, became the advisor of the most powerful man in Germany, created the first flying saucer, and led a secret society that might still control many governments. Maria Orsic lived a remarkable life, but her name was erased from the history books. And in this video, you will find out why. "Do not be afraid," said the voice in young Maria's head. "All will be explained in due time." Lying in her bed, Maria wondered if she was imagining it all. She had been having visions and hearing voices, but had ignored them. However, something was about to happen that she would not be able to ignore forever. "Maria, Maria Orsic," called the voice. It had been calling her name for days now, but this time, Maria responded. Silently, in her mind, she replied, "Yes, I'm here." And that changed everything. What the voice said next put Maria Orsic on the path to immense power and secured her place in history. "At last," said the voice, "at last you have accepted us, Maria." It seemed to belong to a woman. "Do not be afraid, Maria. You are chosen," it said. "Chosen by who? Who are you?" she asked. "We are very far away, yet always with you. There is life outside of this world of yours. What you call the constellation of Taurus, we call home. We are surrounded by various planets and multiple suns, but the one on which we reside is called Aldebaran." Maria was too busy to question any of this. She had a notebook and a pen by her bed. She had grabbed them when the voice called out for her. After days of ignoring the voice, Maria had planned to have a conversation with it and write everything down. This would help her assess if she was going crazy or if there was any merit to what she was hearing. "What do you want from me?" she asked the voice. "Our intentions are pure. They always have been. We have visited your planet many times, but right now, I'm in Aldebaran, and I'm speaking with you through the Mirror of Isaias." "Mirror of Isaias?" asked Maria. "You will learn more about it in due time." "So, who are you?" "You will find that out in due time." "Why are you contacting me?" "All will be revealed in due time." And with that, the voice disappeared, and Maria could once again hear the sounds around her. The hustle and bustle of the street below her apartment, her neighbor's dog barking at the boys next door, the creak of the floorboards in the hallway. Slowly, Maria Orsic opened her eyes to look down at the notes she had taken, and what she saw horrified her. She did not recognize the language she had written. It looked like a bunch of symbols she had never seen before, yet she could read them perfectly. It was as if she had known this language her whole life, and had somehow unlocked the ability to use it. Had this happened just one day ago, Maria would have been horrified, but not anymore. Maria had changed. She had confidence that she could not explain, confidence that would take her directly to the corridors of power in Nazi Germany. Within a few weeks of accepting the voice, Maria was at Café Schopenhauer in Vienna. She was at a table with 4 others. Occultist Karl Haushofer, who had made connections with the Tibetan Yellow Hats, one of the most powerful secret societies in Asia. Baron Rudolf von Seebutendorf, who had studied the Golden Dawn. Lothar Weiss, a World War I ace pilot, and Bishop Gernot, who was a major figure in yet another secret society, the Inheritors of the Knights Templar. In short, this meeting was a melting pot of different esoteric societies, and Maria Orsic was representing the Daughters of Isaias. These were women who could channel voices from Aldebaran. So far, Maria was the only one who could do this, but over time, she found others like her and got them to formally join her circle. The question is, Why were people connected to so many different secret societies meeting in a cafe in Vienna? And the answer was that they all had reached the same conclusion, that 1917 was going to be the year of transformation. A new dawn was just around the corner. And how it would come about was the subject of that meeting. Karl Haushofer shared wisdom from Tibet, while Baron Rudolph talked about the hidden messages in the Indian Vedas. Bishop Gurnet talked about the secret books of the King's Templar. All of these seemed to point towards a voice from outside that would bring in the new dawn. Everyone in that meeting was convinced that Maria Orsic could hear that voice, so they decided to merge their occult factions into one secret organization, the Vril Society. Soon, the Vril Society held its first big meeting, where Maria Orsic revealed that the voice had given her technical details that would help in the development of a flying aircraft. But to fulfill this vision, Maria would need resources that no secret society had. The Thule and the inheritors of the Knights Templar were pretty powerful and had pledged their allegiance to Maria, but they too did not have access to the scientists and engineers that Maria would need to fulfill her vision. It would be hard to convince scientists to join her because they would want material evidence, which the occultists did not have. Lothar Weiss, the World War I pilot, had an idea. He advised Maria to get in touch with politicians so she could one day use government resources to fulfill her vision. Maria considered Weiss' advice and finally decided to get involved in a political movement. The youngest of all political parties was the German Workers' Party, which the Vril Society managed to infiltrate. But just as the Vril were trying to take over the party, they realized that another force was trying to do the same thing. That force was the German intelligence, which had assigned one of its agents to infiltrate the party. That agent's name was Adolf Hitler. On September 12, 1919, Hitler attended a meeting where he was supposed to be a silent observer, but he got into a heated debate which impressed the party leadership. Soon, Hitler would leave his job as a spy and become a full-time member of the party, which had less than 100 members. At that point, Maria Orsic's Vril Society had more members than the German Workers' Party. She could easily swoop in and take over the movement, but she decided that the time was not right. Members of the Vril Society would talk about Maria to anyone who would listen, but Maria herself wouldn't join the party. Some of her followers doubted her hesitation, but soon learned that Maria was right. The German Workers' Party was dismantled the very next year, and 3 years later, Hitler was arrested for high treason. It was the lowest point of his life, but also a point where he was most accessible. There was no entourage around him, and even his political allies were afraid to visit him. That's when Maria Orsic decided to visit him in prison. Prior to Adolf Hitler's arrest, he was described as being depressed and hopeless. Yet a few visits from Maria Orsic renewed his resolve. Suddenly, he had such intense belief in his destiny that even the prison guards were impressed. The cult of Hitler started shortly after he was visited by Maria. At that point, Hitler was broken. His attempt to overthrow the Bavarian government had failed, and his freshly launched Nazi Party members were arrested. That was the end, but Maria convinced him that all of that had happened for a reason. She reminded him that he had survived the Great War. "How many times could you have died, yet you did not die," she said, "and you think these 4 walls will end you?" Hitler took these words to heart and started to persuade other prison inmates and even the guards. The authorities considered the idea of positioning deaf guards around his cell, but then dismissed it because they realized that it would only grow his legend. After serving just 9 months of his 5-year prison sentence, Hitler was released from jail, and he saw it as a sign of Maria Orsicz's power. Over the next decade, Hitler slowly consolidated power and became the leader of the Third Reich, and Maria Orsic became the most powerful woman in Germany. During the early years of Hitler's reign, the Vril society had immense power. Its beliefs seeped into the top levels of the Nazi leadership, and Vril loyalists rose through the party ranks. It wasn't long before other occult groups popped up. An occult craze swept over the Reich. So what were these beliefs that so many powerful men found irresistible? Let's take a look. Vril energy. This was a foundational element of Maria Orsicz's ideology. According to her, Vril energy was an all-permeating force that could be used to heal or destroy. Vril force was unlimited and renewable, and if only the Vril society could produce the technology to use it at scale, the Nazis would win the Second World War. And that brings us to Vril engine, which was a device that could be used to harness Vril energy. The engine would be able to convert Vril force into standard, usable forms of energy like electricity. It was to build this engine that Maria had attached herself to Hitler, and now she had a team of German scientists at her disposal. And they were working on the plans that she had received from the voice that she heard. Superior civilization. Another belief of the Vril society was that among humans, there are those with alien DNA, people known as the Vrilja, whose ancestors bred with beings from Aldebaran. These Vrilja had started the first civilization in Sumeria and had maintained their presence in underground tunnels and cities to survive the prehistoric flood that was talked about in most myths. The Nazis appropriated this belief and asserted that the Aryans were the Vrilja and were hence superior to other races. A new dawn. The final tenet of the Vril society was the new dawn. Members believed that they were in an age of transition, and that Maria would help usher in the new dawn, where humanity would enjoy unlimited resources and energy. Maria Orsicz's hunt for unlimited energy was similar to that of Nikola Tesla, who wanted to unlock the secret to unlimited energy with the Tesla Tower. Orsic and Tesla might have taken different paths towards the same goal, yet they met the same end. Tesla's chief financer, J.P. Morgan, pulled the plug on the Tesla Tower to protect his own interest. After all, he was a founder of General Electric, a company that made money by selling power. Similarly, the SS seemed to have pulled the plug on Maria's work. Given that her interests were in non-destructive tech and the SS wanted to weaponize and maximize destruction, it made sense that the higher-ups in that organization would undercut her. But her files would contain information for future successors to pick up and continue her work. Or so she hoped. Maria's documents vanished just like Tesla's files, which were picked up by mysterious men after he passed away. Both Maria and Tesla's files have not been declassified, leaked, or made public in any manner. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. All of that happened after Maria went missing. But how does the most powerful woman in Germany go missing? Last we checked, she was in Hitler's good graces and had a whole team of scientists working under her. So, what happened? It turns out the Nazis' true motives were not in line with Maria's vision. She wanted to build a flying saucer so humans could visit Aldebaran, The Nazis wanted to build the saucer so they could use it to bomb other countries. There are actually blueprints of these saucers. And yes, that's a real image. Maria wanted to build the Vril engine to provide unlimited power to the citizens of the Reich. The Nazis wanted to use the power to fuel their engines. The only place where the Vril organization and Nazi leadership had overlapping beliefs was when it came to the occult. The SS and the Black Sun organization had deeply esoteric beliefs. Nazi symbols ranging from the Black Sun down to the swastika all stem from ancient religions. The Black Sun, in particular, is derived from the sun circle, a pagan symbol that dates all the way back to Sumeria. Sumerian scriptures seem to allude to humans coming down from the heavens, and one interpretation of these ancient texts is that humans come from another planet. Maria Orsic claimed to receive messages from Aldebaran, a star that is 63.25 light-years away from Earth. Such similar beliefs made bedfellows out of the SS and the Vril Society, but it didn't take long for cracks to show up in their alliance. Towards the end of the Second World War, the Nazi wonder weapons program was under immense pressure to produce increasingly destructive weapons. One of these weapons was Die Glocke, a bell-shaped weapon that was more powerful than the atomic bomb. I made an entire video about it. But Die Glocke was very hard to create, just like the Vril engine, and the Nazi leadership had to choose which program was going to get more resources. Maria was confident that Hitler would choose her and Vril Society, but the Führer had no time to think of technology that could better humanity, so he chose to prioritize the Wonder Weapons program. And Maria Orsic's project was turned into a propaganda tool. As mentioned earlier, most Germans were swept up in the occult fever. They believed in the paranormal and thought that they were destined for greatness. The Nazi Party used esoteric symbols and Maria Orsic's name to convince the German public that they were doing divine work. As far as the Nazis were concerned, ancient symbols and Maria's prophecies were just marketing material to fool the masses. They personally stopped believing in her a long time ago. The only people who believed Maria were the original Vril Circle members who had infiltrated the Nazi Party back when Hitler got out of prison. These insiders continued to protect her after her project was put on the back burner. Many believe that Hitler also believed Maria until the very end, but could not prioritize her long-term plans when the US was racing toward the atomic bomb. He had to let go of the esoteric stuff and focus on building practical weapons of mass destruction. Then Berlin fell, and the Nazis had less than a week to tie up loose ends. And loose ends they did tie up. The Vril scientists heard boots stomping down the hallway. They had been listening to the radio and were prepared for what was to come. They knew that the Red Army would barge in at any moment. They were ready to surrender. But when the doors burst open, the scientists were stunned to see that the army in the compound wasn't Soviet, it was the Nazis. And they had no plans to rescue the scientists. They aimed their weapons at Germany's brightest minds and within minutes massacred all 62 scientists working on the Vril engine project. A few days later, members of the Vril Society received a letter from Maria Orsic. It was the last letter she would ever send, and it ended with the ominous words, "Nobody stays here." After that, Maria vanished, along with her files, never to be seen again. Maria Orsic's stature and her mysterious disappearance have spawned many theories, and today I want to examine all of them, starting with the most esoteric and then going towards the more practical ones. So the most out there theory regarding Maria Orsicz's disappearance is that she left Earth. The escape to Aldebaran theory revolves around Maria's own work, which was all about getting help from distant aliens to build aircraft and renewable energy sources on Earth. She is credited with creating the first ever flying saucer, so it makes sense that she might have used one to escape the Red Army. At least that's what people believed. This is a version of the esoteric escape theory, but it swaps the interplanetary travel angle to a dimension-jumping angle. When you see a drawing on paper, that's 2D, as in two-dimensional, and when you see a statue, that's 3D. The world around us is 3D, but scientists theorize that higher dimensions do exist, we just can't see them. Just like a 2D drawing can't comprehend the world outside of the paper on which it's drawn, we can't fathom the fourth and fifth dimensions. All we know is that they exist. And if Maria had unlocked a way to jump to a higher dimension, to everyone in this dimension, she would seem to have vanished. And that's exactly what happened. She vanished without a trace. Even Hitler's remains were found. But Maria simply blipped out of existence, which strengthens the dimension-jumping theory. The next theory is a lot more practical. Vanishing without a trace doesn't require leaving the planet or this dimension. It can also happen when you go into witness protection. And the US is more than happy to extend this witness protection to anyone with specialized knowledge. This theory posits that Maria was taken to the US as a part of Operation Paperclip, but kept off the books. This might have been controversial in the early 2000s, when we believed that everything about Operation Paperclip was declassified. With new information still coming out, we learned very recently that the US harbored and pardoned Hans Kammler, the Nazi responsible for building the biggest concentration camp in Auschwitz. He wasn't put on the books, and nothing about him was ever declassified. Yet the US did interrogate him, and he was never put on trial with other high-ranking Nazis at Nuremberg. Who's to say that the US didn't extend such a low-key operation deal to Maria Orsic? Remember this image? These are actually Western engineers, Canadians to be precise, struggling to get Canada's VZ9 Avro car off the ground. That's a lot of coincidence that the Western world is trying to replicate a flying saucer after Maria's disappearance. That's all I will say on the matter. Another practical theory regarding Orsic's disappearance is that she simply escaped with other Nazis. One version suggests that she escaped with Hitler himself, but that's not necessary to explain her disappearance. It has already been established that Argentina offered a safe haven to Nazi generals and soldiers. Part of the country speak German to this day. If Maria left for Argentina through the rat lines that were established to smuggle Nazis out of Germany, then she would have changed her name and appearance. And in a world with no social media and far fewer cameras, she would have been able to live out the rest of her life without being bothered by the US or the Soviet Union, who were already too busy fighting each other. But then there's another theory, one that's far more grim, that Maria Orsic was executed by the Nazis. They had already killed the scientists who worked on the Vril engine and the Orsic's flying saucer. So it isn't far-fetched to assume that they killed her as well. So what is the truth? Well, let's look at the holes in each theory. It will be obvious by the end. Let's start with the escape to Aldebaran theory. The biggest problem with it is that Aldebaran is not a planet. It is a star that was significant to many ancient cultures, including Sumerians, but a star nonetheless, and humans cannot survive on stars. Maria may have channeled Aldebaran and its residents. That itself is an extraordinary claim. To then say that she became a resident of Aldebaran is an even greater claim. And unfortunately, we don't have extraordinary evidence to support these extraordinary claims. This applies to escaping dimensions as well. We do not have any evidence that such interdimensional travel is possible, so to say that Maria Orsic pulled it off would at best be plausible speculation. So let's go to a more ordinary claim, that she escaped to Argentina. That has to be true, right? Or let's say she went to the US. That too sounds possible. So one of those things definitely happened, right? Well, even those claims would require proof that we don't have. And this is where things start to get shaky. We don't have evidence of Maria Orsic's existence. There is no birth certificate, no record of birth at a hospital in her town, or anything of that nature to prove that Maria ever existed. Most of what we know about Maria comes from a book written by Maximilien de Lafayette, who argued that the Nazis wiped out all evidence of Maria's existence. If you believe his story, then it makes sense why we can't find anything about her. But you have to admit that we really don't have any evidence of her existence. Researchers have tried their best to find her, and the only place they found her were in books. It was said that the only German source to mention Maria Orsic was a Nazi propaganda pamphlet, but when the pamphlet was tracked down and translated, no mention of Maria was found in it. However, it did mention Vril force, so at least a part of the story seems to be true. The Germans really believed in esoteric sources of energy, but whether a woman named Maria led them or even existed remains to be proven. But what about her photos? A closer look seems to reveal that the image of Maria Orsic was created by blending multiple photos. This picture of another woman was flipped, and then the face from this picture was added to it. So the picture's made up, but that doesn't mean that Maria herself is made up as well. Maybe she never made herself public. Many esoteric figures have advised those in power. Take the example of Rasputin, who had the ear of the Russian royal family. If Maria was such a figure for Hitler, it is possible that her name was more famous than her face. The only other people who would have seen her would be the members of the Vril Society. Unfortunately, the society doesn't seem to exist either. Again, you can say that it is simply success at keeping a low profile, but without any evidence of its existence, the current consensus is that it is a piece of fiction. And there is strong evidence behind this idea. See, the first time Vril was mentioned was in a book from the 1800s titled The Coming Race, which reads like a personal account. In the book, the author mentioned discovering a highly advanced subterranean race known as the Vrilia. These beings could channel a powerful force known as Vril. Sound familiar? After the book came out, the idea of Vril spread through the occult circles. It is unclear whether Maria Orsic was a real woman who got the idea of Vril from the book, or if she was invented to repackage the idea of Vril for Nazi Germany. But what is clear now is that the author of The Coming Race, Edward Bulwer Lytton, intended his work to be satirical, and ultimately categorized it as science fiction. Even with all of this, there's room for those who believe in Vril and Maria. They could say that Edward referenced a real organization and energy source in his fictional work. Authors do this all the time. George R.R. Martin famously used historical events as inspiration for his books like The Game of Thrones. So it is possible that Edward Bulwer Lytton used a real-life organization and their beliefs in his work. After all, there is a real Nazi pamphlet titled Vril, the Cosmic Prime Force, At least some people in the Reich really believed in it. But unless we have any evidence of Maria Orsicz's existence, we have to view her as a myth. A myth that might one day be proven real, but one that is currently unproven.